been involved with cars, I think it's fair to say, all my life. My dad's a mechanic, my grandfather was a mechanic, started business in 1966, which is still running today, which is where I work, Morley Auto Services. So it was kind of inevitable that I would be involved in cars. My earliest memories getting told off by my granddad for throwing a load of engine oil down the drain, not because I threw the engine oil down the drain, but because there was some important engine bits in said bucket which went down the drain. So it was kind of inevitable that I would end up involved in cars. The Ford thing actually happened by accident because I was into Vauxhalls as an impressionable teenager, and I actually bought my first Martin Escort to go take to Halfords where all the boys hung out with their Sierra Cosworths and all that, and actually to take the mickey out of them, but I kind of fell in love with it and it snowballed from there. The idea of putting a mirror under the bonnet to look at myself rather than the engine that they all seemed to be looking at didn't really pan out, so I ended up restoring this Martin Escort, and it kind of snowballed from there. At one stage I had about 30 Escorts. I mean, that sort of led on to the job with the magazine more by accident than anything else. It was in talks for launching a new title, and I got talking to the then editor, and one thing led to the other, and I was there from launch, and I think it was my passion that kind of kept me there all this time. The car itself, it came about kind of by accident and on a whim. I was at the Lakes tour, which is a big gathering of RS Escorts up in Cumbria, and there was a couple there that sat really low on nice wheels. This is four-door Mark II Escorts, and at the time, four-doors were very much overlooked. People just cut the roof off them and took bits off them and threw them away. And I was really keen as a new editor of Retro Ford, so I thought, you know what, let's do a four-door Escort project build. And I just had a new lad starting for me. He seemed quite excitable, so I commissioned him with the task of finding a cheap four-door Escort. I mean, at the time, they were about £1,000 down, and he found this one for £600, which is actually, all told, is a bargain because it didn't have much rust in it. A bit of newspaper in the front panel, but we don't talk about that. Yeah, so really and truly, the idea was to build just a smart, initially this is a smart road car. It kind of snowballed from there, I guess. And by the end of the weekend, my plan involved, let's turn it into a track day car and let's do it in 4 days, because that'd be a brilliant idea. So Chris found the car for me on eBay. This was while I was still in the Lake District. I think it was the week after we headed to I think it was Norfolk area anyway. We loaded up the trailer on the back of the Surf, went there. It had just been pulled out of a garage. It was ideal because one elderly gentleman owned it. He clearly loved it, but he passed away sadly, and it just sat in a garage and it got scabby in the usual places, but it wasn't too bad. It had its original strut tops, which if you're into Fords is a very important thing. So handed over the money, loaded her up, cleared off. Admittedly, I might have left my wallet on the spare wheel of the Surf, and only realised this as we were nearing the Dartford crossing. Have you got a pound? No, I haven't got a pound. Where's my wallet? Must have been on the back of the car. Drove all the way back. Luckily enough, it had been handed into the local police station. Thank you, whoever handed that in, saved me a lot of grief. No money was taken or anything. I think they said it had fallen off the back of the car on the roundabout or something. Any other time, that's not going to happen. But for whatever reason, the gods were smiling on us that day. We got the car back. I think that was a Friday, maybe a Thursday, and the build was to start on the Monday, which was to be Chris's first day officially on the magazine. He's turned up at the workshop, and we've just gone straight into it. For whatever reason, at the time I thought it'd be a fantastic idea to try and build a track car. I guess maybe because it's got 4 doors. We did 4 doors, 4 days, £4,000, so the budget was £4,000, turn this old car into a track car. We spent a bit more than £4,000. Truth be known, it took a bit more than 4 days, but that's the joy of magazine creative editorial. That's a spoiler there for you. So we arrived at Brands Hatch. The track evening, calling it a track day, track evening had already started. We were still actually building the car in the pits. Got got it out on track, and 4 laps later, I think it was, maybe 7 if we're lucky, it expired, for want of a better word, in a cloud of its own depression and smoke and steam. So, in answer to the question that the initial feature posed, can you build a track car in 4 days for £4,000? No, you can't. But at least we tried, and actually it was the start of a beautiful relationship. So, after the first outing, the old girl sat for a bit because it was in trouble by me, because I was upset with it for braking and not letting me prove a point. Because I was young and keen and wanted to prove a point at the time. Silly. About a year later, someone came up with a replacement engine, but this time it was a built unit, not one I found in my shed and pretended I bought on eBay. So I thought, yeah, let's do it. We put the engine in, all keen, it started up, first turn of the key. So what better way to test your newly fixed track car that you built in 4 days that broke than take it to Scotland for a track day, which was 100 million miles away. Stay the night and drive home the next day. Fantastic idea. So we drove it up to Scotland, Knock Hill circuit, fantastic track, great people. Got it out on track. I think it lasted 5 laps this time before it broke. That was a brand new engine, bear in mind, and the bottom pulley exploded and went through the radiator. Game over. That was the end of that track session. So we took the engine out, posted it back up to the guy who built it, who was as bemused as we were. He did a fix on it. We got a nice new radiator, and then it can't have been a year. It must have been a year later, because I think his next outing was back up the road to Scotland again. Another fantastic and inspired idea. But so we travelled back up the road to Knock Hill again. The idea being drive up there, do a track day, sleep in a tent, drive home the next morning. This time it arrived broken. We pulled up in the car park, looked on the trailer, there was brake fluid everywhere. For what, there's no reason, but the brake caliper had broken and emptied itself. So we had to fix the caliper on site, but we did, and it actually started at the track day, did the whole track day, didn't miss a beat. That was the beginning of it being reliable, thankfully, because I'd really had enough at that point. Truth be known, that's probably an abridged version of all the outings, because I'm fairly sure we went back to Brands Hatch a couple of times. It broke a lot in its early days. We put this down to, for whatever reason, there was a monkey in the car when we stripped it out, and there was a lot of things in the car we stripped, but there was a monkey. It got put in my toolbox, and we wondered whether this monkey had special powers, because obviously toy monkeys have special powers. So, long story short, we cable tied it to the front of the car, and after that, the car was fine. It was good as gold. So, there is power in the monkey. Over the first couple of years owning the car, it evolved a fair amount, whether it's engine related. We started off on carbs, and we moved to carbs with management on the ignition side of things. Then we moved on to throttle bodies, a fully mapped system. We upgraded the suspension throughout, and tweaked it as you go, because that's what you do when you've got these cars. They're never finished, you're always playing with them. And ultimately I just wanted it to go faster and handle better, and once it was reliable, it did. And actually it spent a year fully road legal. We drove it up to the Lake District, nearly poisoned ourselves, because fumes were literally coming out of the engine block, into the car, into us. So after 300 miles, you can imagine we felt pretty poorly. But it was all part of its story. So it's been through track car. We even had Barry Lee driving it at one point, setting a lap time around Brands Hatch. The name might not mean anything to everyone, but he was a bit of a hero of mine, oval racing and various other things. So yeah, it really did evolve, and we were always tinkering with it once we found that reliability, which was crucial, because I really loved to hate it when it kept breaking down, as you can probably understand. There were times when we weren't speaking, but yeah, once it was reliable, it was great fun. It was just so drivable and really enjoyable to be in and out on track with. Yeah, at one point Burton Power This was the end of its life as an out-and-out track car. Burton Power lent me their 2.2 Pinto, which was quite special because it had an alley block and an alley head and lots of custom bits in it. It was running throttle bodies and well over 200 brake horsepower, which in a car that weighs 800 kilos wet through meant for quite a quick little thing. So that's probably when it was at its peak for gripping, but it didn't really stay like that for long because then I found something else to entertain me, which started to cost a lot of money. The worst question to be asked is what is drifting, because it's difficult to explain it in such a way that it doesn't sound silly, because the idea is just to try and crash the car without crashing it, for want of a better explanation. So you're going to go arrive at a corner sideways, travel through the corner sideways, leave the corner sideways, producing as much smoke and awesomeness as you can. I mean, if you can take the steering wheel off and do it around the corner, you're winning at life. It's a sport, certainly when I got into it, that was kind of a reserve for Japanese cars. You've got to remember, whilst Japanese cars are quintessential with drifting, or certainly were, the old Escorts were doing it in the forests in the 70s with Roger Clark and Harry Vatanen and all that at the wheel. So they're not strangers to being thrown sideways, and they're good handling little cars, so you've got a good base. What got me into it was actually kind of the track day thing, because I was always getting black flagged because understeering is fast on a track, but if you come out sideways it's slower but it's more fun. So you find yourself stamping on the accelerator pedal and you're coming out the corner with a bit of lock on, and that's happy days. But then you get the old flag comes out and you've got to go in and the marshal says, oh, don't do that because it's naughty. And that happened a lot at Brands Hatch. One of the guys that inspired me was Declan Munley. The geezer was mental behind the wheel of his green Mark II Escort. And I think what actually did it was he came over for a show we were involved with at Lidden Hill, and I got to go out in it for a passenger ride. And it was mental. It was like being in a computer game. The way he was driving his car, it was just like, I want this for me. I can do this on the computer. I am the bollocks, for want of a better word, on the computer. I can do this in real life. So I started getting excited then. And there was another lad, Terry Davis, who had a 4-door Mark II Escort, who'd entered the British Drift Championship at around that time. And I thought, that's cool. That is cool for an old Escort to be out in the British Drift Championship. I want a bit of that. So those guys kind of got me going, and combined with the old kept getting black flagged at track days, that's kind of what forged my path into the world of drifting. Although it didn't start with an Escort, because actually I was going to start with a Capri, but it didn't happen that way. After going out with Declan, he made it look easy. Sitting in the passenger seat is easy to say that, but the man, he was at one with the car, and it just looked, like I said, like a computer game, and I thought, I can do that. I can so do that. There's a few little tweaks you've got to do to the cars to make them drift per se, rather than just power oversteer out of a corner. But I thought, I've definitely got that, 100% got that. So we did a couple of modifications to the steering to give it some more lock, which means you've got more angle on the wheels, and then went up to do a drift experience day at Alton Park, I think it was, where they wetted down the tarmac and you went out there, and for one day you were a hero. And for that day I was a hero. The Escort was dancing around. I come away from there feeling pretty good about it. I thought, we can do this, we can go drifting. The plan was to use the Escort while we were building this mega Capri that was going to happen. So what better thing to do after only going drifting once than to queue yourself up to go for your licence for the British Drift Championship. That was silly, because we went to Landau Park and I just made myself look like a complete bellend because I couldn't drift. I made myself look a wally. Needless to say, I didn't get my licence on that day. it's a lot harder than it looks to do it properly. So we came away from there a little bit deflated, if I'm being honest, but we knew what we had to do. We made some modifications to the car, went and did a lot of practicing, and I thought, yeah, we've got this now, we've got this. So we went to the second licensing day for the British Drift Championship. I was a lot more confident that we were going to get somewhere because I'd done a lot of practice and the car was a lot better by then. Went out in the practice sessions, I was doing alright, I was pleased with my progress. The guys in the championship, like the organisers, were saying, yeah, it's good, you've really improved a lot, this is what we want to see, carry on like that, blah blah blah. Then came the time to sit in the car and give us 3 of your best runs. I forgot how to drift. I was terrible. It was embarrassing. I don't know what it was, but I think the pressure just got to me and I just lost my head. I was rubbish again at drifting, terrible. So we come away from there quite embarrassed again. And there was one more chance to get into the British Drift Championship that year, and brilliantly that was in Scotland, what seemed to be the place that we always ended up going to with the car. Hopefully it wasn't going to break this time. So like a hero, I flew up in an aeroplane and the boys trailered the car up for me. I don't know how that occurred, but they took the car up with the trailer and I ended up flying with my dad and friend Ad. Went out full of confidence. We've done a lot more practicing before then. I've been helped out by Malcolm Foskett from Norfolk Arena. He spent a lot of time with me making sure I could actually do it and I could stand the pressure. So anyway, I was a lot more confident that time. Throughout the practice we were rocking it, the car was on song, it was smoking, it was getting good angles, I didn't make any mistakes, I was really, really happy, in a good place. Smashed the first 2 runs, and then on the 3rd run, I don't know whether it was Attack of the Monkey, Revenge of something or other, but on the 3rd run I was in the big long corner and a bit of paper that I didn't even know was in the car came out from the roll cage and hit me in the face. All the times I've been doing drifting before that, this paper's never been there, but what it was the MOT. It was still MOT'd at this point. The MOT hit me in the face and I spun it and I thought, this isn't happening, this really isn't happening, because I did have to work really hard to make the drift thing happen. There was about 6 or 8 weeks from getting the licence to the first round of the championship, and at that time it was still basically a track car with a couple of little modifications. When we built it, we rattle canned it satin black. It was rough around the edges, I think is the best way of putting it. All of a sudden now we're going competitive motorsport with it, so perhaps it was time to take it a bit seriously. There was 6 to 8 weeks from the licensing day to the first round of the championship. We turned up and there was all these cars with the cliche big wings, big wheels, and we were there in our little old Escort. We were 200 horsepower up against 400 or 500 horsepower drift cars. It was scary, to be honest with you, but we were there to give it our best shot. Qualified in the top 16, and then it was time for the drift battles, which is where 2 of you go, and the idea is to get close to each other and the winner is the best one. And for my first time out, I forced one of the regular guys there to go one more time, which means the judges thought it was too close to call. In the end he ended up winning, but I was really pleased with the fact that we'd even qualified and the fact that my first judged run went one more time. So, but yeah, it was great. It was really cool. So once I'd learned, once I got to grips with the chassis on the car, as it stands, it was handling really well. It was now time to look at getting more power in it, and we'd started building an engine for the Capri that never happened, and we thought, let's put that engine in the Escort. I just happened to have a sequential gearbox that I bought for the Capri. We put that in there, so now we had the power to match the handling of the car. And we took it to Lyddon Hill, I think. We did alright, we qualified mid-pack and got into the top 8. Yeah, it was a lot better because you now had the power, but because you'd learnt with not having much power, you could go in really fast, but then you had the power to carry you through the corner fast, and still trying to avoid using the handbrake. Again, it's not really my style of driving. I don't enjoy using it. So with the confidence in the car, you can just get it in there, upset it and tip it into the corner sort of thing. Trying to explain what the car means to me is fairly difficult because we've had such a turbulent relationship. At times I've hated the thing, you know, it's sat in the corner in disgrace, no engine in it, but we've had so many good times in it, not just in the car but in the workshop and all the people that have been involved over the years. There's been so many good times involved with the car, whether it's going up the motorway to Scotland to do 3 laps of a Knockhill circuit. We had such a good laugh in the tent, even in the tents afterwards, and that was brought to me because of that car. And it's those sort of things, that is why it doesn't matter how hard up I get, it will be the very last car that I have to sell. I've had to sell cars in the past because in life you have to do these things, but of all my cars this would be the last one that goes because there are so many personal memories attached to it. Looking to the future, it needs coming apart and giving a bit of love. I keep toying with the idea of putting it on the road, but then I value my licence and I don't trust myself. Last couple of times out in Ireland, I'm surprised it come back in one piece, being quite honest, because it's become my way of letting off steam as well. The reality is I'll probably push it back in here and take it out again next year, but a lot of me would like to think we're going to take it apart and give it the refresh that it deserves.